If a maid ever tells you to stay silent, you listen. Especially when she sounds like she already knows how you die. I wasn't supposed to be home before midnight, not tonight, not with the meeting downtown running longer than expected, but something felt off around 9:17 p.m. Something I couldn't explain, so I cut it short, got in the car, and told my driver to take me back to the estate on the north side. The kind of place built to look untouchable, 3 stories of glass and stone sitting on 10 acres of private land. Monitored, guarded, controlled, or at least that's what I thought until I stepped through the front door and realized how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet. Not the kind that comes after a long day, but the kind that feels like the house is holding its breath. The kind that makes every instinct sharpen at once. I didn't hear the usual footsteps from the night staff. No distant hum of the kitchen. No music from the west wing. Just a single light glowing from the back, near the kitchen. And that's where I saw her, Lena Hayes, standing perfectly still with her back to me, wearing the same neutral uniform she always wore, gray, simple, forgettable, except tonight nothing about her felt forgettable. Not the way she stood. Not the way she didn't react to the sound of the door closing behind me. Not even when my shoes hit the marble floor with a sharp echo that should have made anyone turn around. But she didn't. She just stood there like she had been waiting for something or someone, and then she spoke, soft, controlled, like she was placing each word exactly where it needed to land. Don't move, stay silent. And for a second, just 1 second, I thought she was joking, because no one tells me what to do inside my own house. No one gives orders and expects them to be followed. But there was something in her voice that stopped that reaction before it could even form. It wasn't fear, it wasn't panic, it was certainty. The kind that comes from knowing something you don't, the kind that doesn't need to be explained. So I didn't move, I didn't speak, I just watched her. As she slowly turned her head. Not fully, just enough so I could see her profile. Calm, focused, completely aware of everything around her. Her eyes didn't widen when she saw me, didn't even flicker with surprise, like she had already accounted for this, like my early return was just another variable she had already adjusted for. And that's when I felt it, that subtle shift in the air, like the house wasn't empty after all, like something was wrong in a way I couldn't yet define. She stepped closer to me without hesitation. Her movements precise, measured, like every inch, had already been planned, and when she reached me, she placed her hand flat against my chest, right over my heartbeat, steady, unshaken, while mine was starting to pick up, and she leaned in just enough for her voice to reach only me, barely above a whisper. They're already inside. And in that moment, everything I thought I controlled, every layer of security, every system, every man I trusted, it all cracked just enough for doubt to slip in, because Lena wasn't guessing, she wasn't speculating, she knew, and somehow, impossibly, she knew before I did. The space beyond the panel swallowed the light almost instantly. A narrow passage lined with unfinished concrete and exposed beams that carried the faint echo of our movements farther than I liked. And yet Lena did not hesitate for even a second. She stepped inside like she had walked this path before. Like the darkness did not slow her down, and I followed, pulling the panel closed behind us with a careful, controlled motion until the last sliver of light disappeared and we were left with nothing but shadow and the sound of our breathing. The air felt different down here, cooler, heavier, carrying the distant vibrations of the house above us, each faint shift translating into something I could not fully interpret. But she could. I could tell by the way her head tilted slightly every few seconds, listening, always listening, as if the walls themselves were speaking to her. I reached forward, catching her wrist just enough to stop her for the first time since this began. "No, I," said quietly, the word sharper than anything I had spoken so far, and she froze, not pulling away, not reacting defensively, just still, her pulse steady beneath my fingers. "You do not get to move me through my own house without telling me what is happening," I continued, my voice low but controlled, every word measured. "Who are you, Lena?" And this time, I did not soften it, did not frame it as a question meant to be answered easily. It was a demand, one that had been building since the moment she told me to stay silent, the moment she knew something she should not have known, the moment she anticipated movements that even my own security team would have struggled to predict. For a brief second, the silence between us thickened, stretched, and I saw it. The smallest shift in her expression, not fear, not panic, but calculation, like she was deciding how much truth I could handle in the seconds we had left. "If I tell you," she said slowly, her voice quieter now but heavier. You will not trust me? I almost laughed at that, a dry, humorless reaction that barely made it past my lips. I already do not, I replied, and that was the truth, sharp and undeniable, but I was still here, still following her. Still alive because of her decisions, and that contradiction hung between us like a weight neither of us could ignore. She studied me for a moment longer, then exhaled softly, not in relief, but in resignation, as if something inevitable had finally arrived. Her free hand moved, not toward me, not toward any obvious threat, but to the pocket of her uniform, and for the first time since I had known her, I saw something that did not belong to the role she had been playing, a small, matte object, compact, precise, designed for control rather than appearance, not something a housemaid would ever carry, not something anyone would overlook if they were paying attention. My eyes narrowed immediately, every instinct sharpening at once. That is not yours? I said quietly, and she did not deny it, did not even try. She just held it there for a fraction of a second before slipping it back out of sight, like the reveal itself had already served its purpose. No, she said simply, and then she stepped closer, her voice lowering again. But this time there was no softness in it, no careful cushioning of truth, just clarity. And neither is this house. The words landed harder than anything else she had said tonight, not because they were louder, but because of what they implied, because of the way she said them, like ownership was not as absolute as I believed, like control was something that could be taken, shifted, rewritten without warning. My grip on her wrist tightened slightly, not enough to restrain, but enough to anchor the moment. Explain? I said, and this time it was not optional, not negotiable. She held my gaze, steady, unflinching, and for the first time, I saw something beneath the surface, something that had been hidden behind her silence for weeks, maybe months, something that did not belong to a servant or an employee, something trained, deliberate, dangerous in its own way. I was not placed here to serve you, she said, each word precise, controlled. I was placed here to watch you. The corridor seemed to close in around us as that truth settled, reshaping everything I thought I understood about her, about this house, about the past months I had spent assuming I was the one in control. My mind started connecting pieces I had not even realized were missing, every quiet moment, every unnoticed movement, every time she had been exactly where she needed to be without explanation. And before I could respond, before I could push further into that revelation, a distant sound echoed faintly from above, sharper this time, more urgent, and Lena's expression shifted instantly back to focus, back to action, like whatever truth she had just given me would have to be enough for now. They are accelerating, she whispered, and then her eyes locked onto mine with a final, unshakable certainty. Which means we are running out of time. Time compressed into something sharp and narrow, like every second had edges now, and Lena moved before I could question anything else, turning deeper into the passage with a certainty that told me she had already mapped the next 10 steps ahead of me. Her hand brushing along the wall until her fingers found a small recessed panel that I had not used in years. She pressed it once, precise, and somewhere ahead a faint mechanical shift responded, subtle, almost silent, but enough to confirm that. She knew exactly where every hidden mechanism in this house was located, and that realization settled heavier than anything she had said so far, because knowing the layout was one thing, but knowing the hidden systems meant access, time, proximity, things no outsider should have had. You memorized everything? I said under my breath, keeping pace behind her. And she did not deny it, did not even glance back. I had to, she replied. And there was no apology in her tone, only fact. The passage opened slightly into a lower chamber, a transitional space between levels, designed as a fallback point. Reinforced walls, limited access, a place I had built as a contingency but never expected to use like this. And yet here we were, stepping into it not as a strategic retreat but as a necessity. Lena stopped just inside, her posture shifting again as she listened, her breathing steady, controlled, while mine had started to sync with the rhythm of the situation whether I liked it or not. Above us, the faintest echo of movement changed, not louder, but different, more deliberate, more focused, like whatever they were looking for had not been where they expected. And that meant they would adjust, adapt, close in. They know something is wrong, I said quietly, more to myself than to her, and she nodded once, confirming it without hesitation. They know you are not where you should be, she corrected, and that distinction mattered. It meant this was not about general uncertainty anymore. This was about deviation, about a plan that had already been disrupted, and disruption created pressure, pressure created mistakes, but only if you moved faster than the people trying to control you. Lena turned toward me then, fully this time, and for the first time since this began. She did not immediately move. She held eye contact, steady, intentional, like she was measuring something beyond the moment. Listen carefully, she said, her voice low but firm. Everything you think you know about tonight is already behind. I frowned slightly, the statement cutting through the noise of everything else. What does that mean? I asked, and she stepped closer, not invading, not aggressive, but direct. It means this was never about breaking in, she said. They were already here before you left this morning. The words landed with a precision that shifted the entire frame of what I was dealing with. Not an intrusion, not an external threat forcing its way in, but something that had been present, hidden, waiting, integrated into the environment I trusted. My mind ran through every layer of security, every protocol, every clearance level, trying to find where that kind of breach could exist without being detected, and the answer was not immediate, which meant it was deeper than I had accounted for. Lena watched the realization settle in my expression, and for a brief second, something softened in her gaze, not sympathy, but recognition, like she had expected this moment. You built a system that relies on loyalty, she said quietly. They built one that relies on patience. I exhaled slowly, the weight of that difference pressing harder than any immediate threat, because loyalty can be bought, broken, or misplaced, but patience waits for the exact moment when everything aligns, when defenses are lowest, when timing shifts just enough to create opportunity. And my early return, the one decision I thought was instinct, might have been the only reason I was not exactly where they expected me to be right now. Lena stepped back slightly, her attention already shifting forward again. Recalibrating, always recalibrating. We are not escaping, she added, her tone sharpening again. We are repositioning. And that choice of words told me everything I needed to know about what came next. This was not about running, not about hiding. This was about surviving long enough to understand who had turned my own house into a place I no longer controlled. And as she moved toward the next concealed exit, her final words settled into place like the beginning of something far more dangerous than I had anticipated. Because whoever planned this expected you to die without ever knowing why. The next door did not look like a door at all, just another section of reinforced wall blending into the concrete. But Lena's hand found the exact spot without hesitation, pressing twice in a rhythm too deliberate to be random, and a narrow seam appeared, barely visible until it shifted just enough to reveal a hidden opening. She stepped through first, not checking behind her, not waiting for permission, and I followed because at this point hesitation felt more dangerous than trust. The space beyond was tighter, more confined, forcing us closer together as the air grew even cooler, the faint hum of the house's internal systems vibrating through the structure around us. And above that hum, something else, a subtle pattern that I could not fully isolate until Lena slowed slightly, her head tilting again, listening, always listening. They changed direction, she whispered, and I felt it too now, not the sound itself but the absence of it where it should have been. The upper level had gone quiet in a way that did not match a search pattern. It was too controlled, too intentional. They are not looking anymore, I said, the realization forming as the pieces aligned, and she nodded once, her expression tightening just enough to confirm it. No, she replied. They are waiting. The word settled heavier than anything else, because waiting meant certainty, meant they believed the outcome was already decided, and that meant they had accounted for movement, for deviation, for the possibility that I was not where they expected me to be, which meant the trap was not tied to a location, it was tied to me. Lena stopped abruptly, turning to face me fully again, and this time there was no space left for deflection, no room for partial answers. There is something you need to understand, she said, her voice lower now but carrying a weight that cut through everything else. This was not built to chase you? I frowned slightly, the statement already shifting the ground beneath everything I thought I understood. Then what was it built for? I asked, and her eyes held mine with an intensity that felt almost like a warning. To end this cleanly, she said, and before I could press further, before I could demand the details she was clearly holding back, She reached again into her uniform, but this time she did not hide what she pulled out. She held it in the low light just long enough for me to see it clearly. A compact device, matte, precise, its surface marked with subtle indicators that told me it was not improvised, not random, but engineered, intentional. My gaze sharpened immediately, tracking every detail, every line, every implication. "Where did you get that?" I asked, my voice steady but edged with something sharper now, and she did not hesitate, did not soften the answer. "It was given to me," she said, and the simplicity of that statement carried more weight than any explanation could have, because it confirmed what I had already begun to suspect. She had not just observed this plan. She had been part of it, integrated into it from the beginning, and yet here she was, standing between me and whatever outcome had been designed. And that contradiction pressed harder than anything else. "By who?" I asked, and for the first time since this began, she did not answer immediately. Her gaze flickered away for a fraction of a second, not in fear, not in hesitation, but in something more complicated, something layered with history I did not yet understand. "Someone who does not expect me to hesitate," she said finally, and that answer did not clarify anything. It only deepened the fracture between what I knew and what was actually happening. A faint shift echoed above us again. Not movement this time, but something structural, subtle but unmistakable. And Lena's focus snapped back instantly, her grip tightening around the device as her eyes locked onto mine. "We are out of time," she said. And then, with a clarity that left no room for interpretation, she added the one thing that made everything else fall into place with a chilling precision. "This house is no longer the trap." She paused, just long enough for the meaning to settle. "You are." For a moment, everything went completely still, not just around us but inside me, like my body needed a second to process what she had just said. Because a house can be secured, reinforced, defended, but a person moves, a person reacts, a person can be guided without realizing it. And that realization hit harder than any immediate threat. I looked at her differently now, not as the woman who had been quietly moving through my house for months, but as someone who had been placed with intention, precision, and patience. "You said you were sent to watch me?" I said slowly, each word measured. "Not to guide me into something." Her expression tightened slightly, not defensive, not guilty, but aware of the line I was drawing. "That was before tonight," she replied, and that answer shifted something deeper than the situation itself, because it meant whatever role she had been given had already changed, already broken from its original purpose. "Before what?" I pressed, stepping closer now, not to intimidate, but to force clarity. "Before the moment you decided not to follow orders." She held my gaze, steady, unflinching, and for the first time there was something unmistakable in her eyes. Not fear, not hesitation, but conflict, layered and real. Before I realized they were not planning to leave anything behind. "She," said quietly, and the meaning of that did not need explanation. Not for someone like me. I understood exactly what she meant. Not chaos. Not a message, but absence, a clean ending, no trace, no questions, no answers, just silence where something used to exist. And for the first time since this began, I felt something shift that had nothing to do with control or strategy. Something colder, something closer to certainty. "And you changed that," I said, not asking, just stating what had already become obvious. She nodded once, small but decisive. "I delayed it," she corrected, and that word mattered more than anything else she could have said. Delayed meant this was not over, not avoided, just pushed forward, which meant whatever came next was already in motion, already adjusting to her decision. A faint pulse ran through the structure again, stronger this time, not loud but unmistakable, and I felt it under my feet, through the walls, a shift that did not belong to footsteps or movement, something embedded deeper. "What is that?" I asked, even though part of me already knew. Lena looked up instinctively, her focus snapping to the layers above us, calculating, measuring. "Timing?" she said, and then her eyes dropped back to mine, sharper now, more urgent. "They are not waiting for you to be found," she continued. "They are waiting for you to be where they want you," and that clarified everything with a precision that left no room for doubt. This was not about searching or chasing, it was about positioning, about guiding outcomes without direct force. and suddenly every decision I had made since stepping into the house felt less like instinct and more like influence, subtle, controlled, designed to narrow options until only one path remained. I exhaled slowly, grounding myself in the only thing that still felt solid: choice. Then we stopped following the path, I said, and for the first time since this began, something in her expression shifted that almost resembled approval. That is what I have been trying to do, she replied, and there was no edge in her voice now, no distance, just truth, direct and unfiltered. Another faint vibration passed through the space, closer now, more immediate, and Lena's grip tightened around the device in her hand as she stepped toward the far end of the passage, where another concealed exit waited, one I recognized as leading to a section of the house that even my own staff rarely accessed. "This will not hold them," she said, more to herself than to me, and then she turned back, her eyes locking onto mine with a clarity that cut through everything else. "But it will give us one chance." She paused, just long enough for the weight of that statement to settle. "To choose where this ends." The next exit opened into a section of the house that even I rarely visited, a service-level access point designed more for contingency than comfort, low ceilings, narrow walkways, and reinforced doors spaced every 20 feet like checkpoints in a system built for control. But control only works when you are the one holding it, and tonight that certainty had already fractured. Lena moved ahead of me without slowing, her steps measured but faster now, urgency threading through her precision. The device still in her hand, catching faint reflections from the dim emergency lights embedded along the floor, each soft glow stretching shadows longer across the concrete walls. I could feel the timing she mentioned earlier now, not as a sound, not as a visible change, but as pressure, like something invisible tightening around the entire structure, closing options one by one. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice steady despite the shift building beneath everything, and she did not look back when she answered, "Somewhere they did not expect you to choose." And that answer told me enough to follow without questioning the direction, because unpredictability was the only advantage left. We reached the end of the corridor where a heavier door stood, reinforced steel behind a plain surface, designed to disappear into the architecture. Lena stopped just short of it, her hand hovering near the access point but not touching it yet. Her head tilted slightly again, listening always. Listening, then she exhaled slowly, a controlled release of tension that felt more deliberate than relieved. "They are aligning," she said quietly, and I stepped closer, watching her profile in the low light. "Aligning what?" I asked, and this time she turned fully, her expression sharper than before, more resolved. "The outcome," she replied, and there was no ambiguity in that answer, no room for misinterpretation. Everything tonight had been designed to narrow toward a single result, and we were now standing at the edge of it. The faint vibration pulsed again, stronger this time, not enough to shake the walls, but enough to confirm that whatever had been set in motion was reaching its final stage. Lena looked down at the device in her hand for a brief second, her fingers tightening around it, and for the first time since she revealed it, I noticed something else, a hesitation, subtle but real, not in her movements, but in her timing, like pressing it would change more than just the situation around us. "That device," I said quietly, "it does not just stop them." She did not respond immediately, and that silence confirmed more than any answer could have. I stepped closer, closing the distance between us, forcing her to meet my eyes. "What does it do?" I asked, and this time she did not look away, did not soften the truth. "It breaks the sequence," she said, her voice low, controlled, but carrying a weight that settled deep. "It interrupts what they planned." She paused, just long enough for the implication to form. "But it also tells them exactly where we are." The air between us tightened instantly because that was the trade, the choice she had been carrying since the moment she decided to change the plan. Survival in exchange for exposure, control in exchange for confrontation. I let that settle for half a second, then nodded once, the decision already forming before I fully articulated it. "Then we choose the moment," I said, and something in her expression shifted again, not surprise, not relief, but alignment, like for the first time tonight we were moving toward the same endpoint by choice, not necessity. Another pulse moved through the structure, sharper now, closer, and Lena's focus snapped back to the door in front of us, her hand finally pressing the access point, the lock disengaging with a quiet, controlled click. She pushed it open just enough to reveal the space beyond, darker, wider, leading upward, back toward the core of the house, not away from it. And that told me everything I needed to know about her plan. We were not escaping. We were stepping into the center of whatever had been designed to end me. Lena glanced at me one last time. Her voice barely above a whisper but carrying more certainty than anything she had said before. "Once we do this," she said, "there is no going back." I held her gaze, steady, unshaken, because there was nothing left to go back to. Not tonight. Not after everything that had already shifted. There never was. I replied, and with that, she pressed the device. Just once, precise, deliberate, and somewhere above us, something changed. The change was not loud, not dramatic, but it was absolute, like the entire house had just exhaled and then locked into a new rhythm. Something subtle shifting beneath the walls, inside the structure, inside the plan itself, and I felt it immediately, not as sound, not as movement, but as interruption, like a sequence had been cut mid-step and forced to restart somewhere else. Lena felt it too. I could see it in the way her shoulders stilled for half a second before she moved again. Faster now. More direct. No more hesitation in her path as she stepped through the doorway and into the open corridor beyond. The space widened as we moved upward, transitioning from the confined passages into a part of the house that opened toward the central level, where everything connected, where everything converged, and that was exactly where she had chosen to go, not away from the threat, but directly into its core. The air felt different here, heavier, charged with something that had not been there before, not danger in the obvious sense, but awareness, like whatever had been waiting now knew exactly where to focus. "They felt that?" I said quietly, already knowing the answer, and she nodded once without slowing. "Yes," she replied. "And now they know we chose to break it." That word again, chose, not reacted, not escaped, but chose, and that distinction mattered more than anything else, because it meant this was no longer their plan alone. We had inserted ourselves into it, altered it, forced it to adapt, and adaptation under pressure creates cracks. Small ones at first, but enough to change the outcome if you know where to look. We reached the edge of the main level, the open architecture stretching out in front of us, wide spaces, clean lines, designed for visibility and control, and now it felt like a stage where something had already been set in motion long before we stepped into it. Lena slowed just enough to listen again, her eyes scanning not for movement, but for absence, for disruption, for anything that did not align with what she expected. And then she exhaled, softer this time, but not in relief, in confirmation. "They are repositioning," she said, and I followed her gaze, seeing nothing at first, just the stillness of a house that should have been alive with people, with motion, with noise, but instead held a silence that felt intentional, deliberate. And then I understood. It was not about what was there, it was about what was missing. Every pattern had been interrupted, every expected movement delayed, and that meant whoever had designed this was now adjusting in real time, trying to regain control of something that was no longer predictable. I stepped forward beside her, no longer following, not because I had taken control back, but because we were now aligned in something neither of us fully owned. "So this is where it ends?" I said quietly, not as a statement of defeat, but as recognition of where we stood. And Lena glanced at me, her expression no longer guarded, no longer distant, but clear, resolute. "No," she said, her voice steady. "This is where it changes." And that was the final shift, not survival, not escape, but transformation. The plan they had built was no longer intact, the outcome they had expected no longer certain, and whatever came next would not be what they prepared for. A faint movement echoed somewhere beyond the open space, subtle, controlled, but no longer hidden, and for the first time since this began, I did not feel like I was being led toward something. I felt like I was standing in the center of it by choice. Lena stepped forward, just one step, enough to make herself visible, enough to signal that we were no longer moving in shadows, and I followed, matching her pace, matching her decision, because whatever this was, whatever it had become, we were facing it together now, not as target and observer, not as controller and servant, but as two people who had chosen to break something that was never meant to be seen. And as the silence around us shifted, tightening, focusing, I understood the one truth that mattered more than anything else. I had ruled everything inside these walls, every room, every decision, every outcome, but tonight, the only reason I was still standing here was because the one person I never noticed had decided I should be.